Now, you've heard of Pokemon Go and yo-yos, walking the dog round the world. How good was that when that craze would sweep through the school? Here's a childhood craze with a difference. Affectionately known as tinnies, small galvanised canoes were all the rage on the Swan River in the early 1900s. Kids used to flatten corrugated iron pieces into a boat shape, and they'd plug any holes with tar from the new bitumen roads. I can see it now. John, go and occupy yourself. There's plenty of corrugated iron and some tar on the roads. Go and make yourself a boat. Stop bothering mum and dad. So there are also reports of tinnies in the regional areas and some of the suburban swamps and lakes around Perth. The ABC's Hilary Smale recently caught up with local historian John McLennan to find out more.
Tinnies were a sheet of galvanised iron flattened out by little boys, normally out of the sight of their parents, and the ends folded up. A bit of bitumen from the local road was added to seal it, and of course all the old nail holes had to be sealed as well. Maybe a piece of wood across the middle to hold the two sides apart, and then they were paddled all around the Swan River. Hi, I'm John McLennan, and I'm a member of the Maylands Historical and Peninsular Association. I'm a researcher, and I enjoy finding out about stuff. And I found out about tinnies. They started in, as far as we can tell, about 1893, when a chap by the name of Izzy Cohen came down from Northam all the way to Perth in a galvanised iron canoe. Some 80 years later, he dropped the flag for the first Avon descent when he was 93.
Amazing. So he's almost the first person known that did the Avon descent, but in a galvanised tinny boat that he made himself.
That's right, and he was 13 years old at the time.
Wow. So you mentioned that the young guys would make it out of bits of things that they could find, basically, yes, including bits of road from the bitumen?
Bits of bitumen, bits of tar as a sealer, because you couldn't have the water leaking in, obviously. There was plenty of new tar on the roads in those days because they were just starting to move away from gravel roads to the bitumen road.
Where would they get the corrugated tin from?
By the 1890s, the first flush of galvanised iron, which had been on roofs, and we've all seen the bull-nosed verandas and so on the old buildings, they were starting to rust out a little bit, and people were starting to use tiles and other methods of roofing. So there's galvanised iron lying around for the kids to find and snaffle.
John, what's your earliest memory or knowledge of tinnies?
Well, I spent a fair bit of time on the Canning River near Riverton in the late 50s. And there were certainly tinnies still around then. My brother had one. Well, he was a part owner in one.
A part owner?
Yes.
Love that. Do you know where he bought it from or how he got his hands on one of those?
Well, he half built it.
Okay.
I can't even remember his friend's name now, but they found a sheet of galvanised iron, they created it, and he paddled around the Riverton jetty in it. Had a lot of fun. I watched from the shore. They never seemed quite right to me.
What do you mean by that? Not quite safe?
Not quite safe. Over the years, as I've discovered during the research, from 1920 to 1935, there were 6 deaths, and every one of them was a non-swimmer. And yet the newspapers of the day wanted a program to get rid of the tinnies. They called them death traps, suicide vessels, terrible names. But the kids were kids. They did what they wanted to do.
And so, John, you're talking about some of the backlash to the tinnies there,
yes,
and obviously the tragic deaths as well, some
yes,
people. What was their downfall? Why did people stop making them in Perth?
Basically, galvanised iron disappeared as a roofing material. There was none left, and television happened, and the kids had something else to do. So that was it. And by the time the next generation from the 60s came along, everything was plastic. And we've just seen a group of plastic canoes or kayaks out on the river this morning.
I'm with John McLennan down by the Swan River at the E Street Jetty in Maylands, and he's telling me about some of his research into tinnies, which were in vogue in Perth from the 1890s through till the 1950s, 60s here in Perth. Very popular, particularly among young boys, making them out of what they could find around the home and their suburb. Where did they store the tinnies when they weren't using them? Do you know?
A lot of them found a nice quiet spot in the river and sank them. And then,
really? So in the actual river?
In the river, and then they'd come back the following day or the following year, depending on what season it was, and they'd lift it up again, dry it out, and off they'd go.
John, where did they take these tinnies? Where did they sail in Perth?
There were reports from 1904 in Bassendean, then further down the river. At the same time, there were reports of a lot of tinnies along the South Perth foreshore. So it was an extremely popular hobby for the young boys to have. All the warnings about how dangerous they were, I doubt that they were actually read by either the parents or the children involved in this, because the rich people had yachts, their children had yachts, and it was the poor people, in a lot of cases the uneducated people, who made the tinnies. They wouldn't read the papers, they didn't see the warnings, and a whole lot of them survived.
Hilary Smale there, speaking to John McLennan from the Maylands Historical and Peninsular Association. Do you remember these tinny canoes? What are your memories of tinnies on the Swan River, other parts of the state? Reports of them in Kalgoorlie, Carnarvon, Geraldton. Charlie's in Pemberton. He says they must have been Australia-wide. We also made canoes in country Victoria, corrugated iron, car roofs, etc. That is quite the achievement, a car roof as a little bit of a canoe. The good old days, eh? Maybe we should start a campaign for our kids, get them away from the screens and devices and get them out in the backyard and on our rivers and waterways, playing with corrugated iron and tar.